All right, good evening and welcome to 100 Words Mate to Mate and Mate to Mate at 8. My name is Craig Turton. I'm the proud co-founder of 100 Words Mate to Mate, a men's health organisation raising awareness about the plight of men's health in this country. 6 men every day take their own life in this country, and we need to do something about it. We need to provoke conversation about it, and that's what we're here to do tonight. About 12, 13 weeks ago, we started a campaign called Mate to Mate. What we want you to do is we want you to ring on at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night and ask him this. Don't ask him how his day is. How's your day out of 10 is what we want you to ask. Okay? He'll give you a number. So when you jump on tonight, we want you to do the same. Tell us how your day's been out of 10, and we'll go through those results a little bit later on. Now, as I say each and every week, I'm a tradesman. I'm not a doctor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. All we are trying to do here at 100 Words Mate to Mate at 8 is this. Mirror a conversation between two mates, and that's what I've got. I'm going to mate of mine on tonight, and that's what we're going to do. Okay? No longer is it good enough to just ask your mate, how you going? He just says good. He asks you how you are. You say good. Nowhere near enough. Okay, so we've got a few people who jumped on already. We get guys ranging from a 9, an 8, and a 7. So that's not too bad. So at any stage tonight, if the conversation gets a bit heavy for you and you are struggling, there is always a number to call. That number is Lifeline on 131114. There is always someone there to listen and take your call. We hope it doesn't get to that stage, but if it does, there's always that number to call. So tonight, hey, huge night for 100 Words. We are blessed to have this man. He played 335 NBL games for a number of teams in this country. He played internationally in Puerto Rico and Serbia. He's a 2-time Olympian representing Australia in men's basketball in Beijing and in London. He's one of the more open and honest blokes I've ever come across. And more importantly, I think what our guest tonight has achieved over the last 4 years is the reason why we got him on tonight. He should be so proud of the stuff that he's achieved, and that's the reason we got him on. A big, huge welcome to Mr. Mark Worthington.
G'day, mate. How are you? I'm good, mate. How are you?
Mate, I'm excellent. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Although, how was your day out of 10, buddy?
I'm going to give myself an 8 today. It was a good day. I made the trip from Perth back down to my hometown of Bunbury, where I'm the current coach of the State League basketball team. I have training in an hour's time with my team, but I also managed to do a few things mental health wise that I do each and every day, but most importantly got out for a good 7K run today during the afternoon in the pouring rain.
What did you punch that at him, mate? 7Ks for you. How long does that take?
Oh, probably it took me about just under 35 minutes. So going at a decent clip still, but the hips are feel it a little bit later on, that's for sure.
It takes me about the same time, mate. I normally do about 35 minutes myself.
Yeah, very good, very good. How are you doing out of 10 today?
Mate, I struggled this morning. I was probably having a pretty ordinary morning. I was probably about a 4. Took stock around about lunchtime, and the day improved, and I'm probably about a 7.8, shall we say. I'm just after the conversation tonight, mate, I reckon I'll be pushed over an 8. It'll be good. It'll end up a good day. So, yeah, looking forward to tonight, mate. Really am.
Oh, beautiful. Me too.
Mate, thank you. As I said, thank you so much for joining us, mate. At the end of the day, the reason we got you on tonight is to talk about your journey and what's happened over the past few years and how you've come out the other side and how you now, through what has happened to yourself and what you've been through, the amount of energy and the good stuff you are doing for people who struggle for mental health. And that's why we got you on tonight, mate. So let's just deep dive and talk about some sort of timeline and how everything that's gone on for you and how it's happened, mate.
Sounds good. Let's dive into it.
Mate, you just tell us where you want to start and over the past sort of 3 or 4 years, what you've been through and how you've come out the other end.
Well, I came to the end of my basketball career a few years ago now, and I'm still playing good basketball. I retired on my second shoulder reconstruction. My last 3 years, I was the captain of Melbourne United, and then won the MVP there. Got fired from that club after winning the MVP, and then moved to Cairns to finish off my career. From there, I moved over to Los Angeles, where I was an assistant coach at Loyola Marymount University under my old college coach, who was the head coach there at the time, followed by coming back to Australia, moving from Cairns to Melbourne, now over to WA to be the coach. Now, a few things happened in that timeline for me. I struggled without knowing that I was struggling at the time, but the end of my career, I was probably going through depression and anxiety, but not realizing I was going through it. And probably more so the point, probably in denial about it as well. I moved to LA, my marriage crumbled. I ended up separating from my wife, which was my doing, not her doing, but my doing through the way that I felt probably about everything. I've got two young boys who are now 11 and 9 who live in Cairns with their mother. I live in WA. So things are challenging at the best of times for me, trying to keep a relationship with my kids who I speak to, if not twice a day via video chat. Thank God for technology and what it's able to do. I got to a really low point after moving back from Los Angeles. I had finally admitted to myself that I needed to go get treatment. So I went to the GP to go get on the mental health plan. I started taking antidepressants for the first time in my life. I got to a point where suicide was on the table. I was going to commit suicide, and we'll dive into that a little bit later on. I managed to get myself out of that hole, moved to Melbourne, where I was working for Sportsbet. Still wasn't probably entirely happy during that stage. Got the call from my dad saying that he had cancer. It is the whole reason I moved back to WA in the first place. And without looking, found myself in a wonderful relationship that I am now the happiest that I've been in a very, very, very long time. And it makes me question why and how I'd got to so low before when I'm just loving life to the full now. So a lot to unpackage in all of that.
Mate, I'm so there's a lot there. You know, with your dad, and having gone through that myself, I know how that feels. But I'm so glad you've got through all that, and you're now with your current partner, and everything's looking a lot better, and you're a lot happier with how you're travelling yourself. But when did you realise that shit, things aren't right, or did you just push it aside?
Yeah, the initial part I definitely pushed aside when I was still playing, and anxiety and depression was there, and I thought that was me at the end of my career, probably feeling a little bit anxious about the future. It was probably me, what I thought was just feeling not great, knowing that I was playing through injury, not great, knowing that I probably wasn't as quick as what I used to be, not great. I had very, very high standards for myself. And so I brushed that aside thinking that that was nothing. And it probably wasn't until the point where I'd probably, I'd had the shoulder reconstruction, which just adds another layer of just hurt to your body and psyche. I was laying on the couch and I just remember going, fuck, this isn't how I should be feeling. I know my shoulders should be feeling sore, and that's totally okay, but the rest of me is not feeling right. And I guess it took a little bit even from that point to acknowledge that I probably need to go see a GP, that I probably need to see what was going on with myself.
Did you ever discuss it with any of your teammates?
No, I never did. And
why is that?
Like, those are the guys that you're around day in and day out. Like, it's one of the things that you miss about basketball is having that camaraderie and the friendship around you all the time. But I guess you don't want them to know the weakness. And we probably, I know during my time as a basketball player, I was probably labelled, you know, one of those warrior type guys that always seemed to plow through stuff. Even when I was physically hurt, it seemed people would say, like, there's not much that was able to stop me. I mean, I played my last 12 out of 14 games with a shoulder totally ripped out, my shooting arm as well, mind you, totally ripped. And I was playing with multiple jabs of painkillers, somewhere roughly between 8 to 12 tablets a game, just to get me through a game. And that was just where my mindset was on pain and injury. Like I could get through that stuff. So like I said, I probably brushed that aside, not thinking that I was one of those people that was suffering from depression, anxiety. When I did go see a psych finally, it took until my third psych that I actually started telling the truth of myself. I think the first two, I probably didn't tell the honest truth of how I was feeling. And if anything, I was probably leading them down a track just to try and protect myself. And I think living in Cairns and having some sort of a profile, that played on my mind a little bit. And it wasn't until I told the second one, look, this isn't working out, and I walked into the third psych, that I said, fuck it. If I'm going to tell the truth, I'm going to tell the whole truth here, because this needs to happen, not for anyone else but myself. And that's what I did. And I went through those 10 sessions, and it was brutal. Some of the stuff that I had to talk about, the suicide stuff, like it's tough to talk about that stuff when it's still fresh in your mind of what was going to happen and how it was going to happen and why it didn't happen and all that. It was tough to admit to yourself that you weren't, that you were struggling. And it wasn't until I started talking to the psych, then I started to open up to one mate in particular. And sometimes it just takes the one mate to be able to have these conversations with. And he didn't judge me. He wasn't in the basketball world. He was just a regular guy. I didn't know at the time, but he was suffering the same things that I was suffering, but he was listening to all my stories and all that, which turned into me actually listening to all his stories later on, because he needed me the same way I needed him. So
do you think he picked up on what you were going through?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. His backstory is he's a Kiwi guy. He was good enough to represent New Zealand in discus, and he was good enough to make the NRL, and he chose not to do either one of them because he just wanted to live a simple life that was out of the eye. He didn't handle pressure and anxiety very well, and that's why he chose not to go down those routes. But he had multiple offers from multiple NRL clubs. He had an offer to represent his country, and he turned it all down because the pressure was too much, and he just thought that was him, you know. He didn't think too much of it. But as we started to walk through his life and understand his background, that I understood that, you know, he'd been suffering anxiety for a very, very long time.
Would you be alive now if it wasn't for him?
Funnily enough, he wasn't the guy that called me when I was contemplating suicide. And so the people that understand Cairns know that from Palm Cove to Port Douglas is a very, very windy road with multiple cliff faces. I lived in Clifton Beach, which was right next to Palm Cove. And I'd parked my car on the side of the road, and I knew I was going to drive straight off the cliff. And as I was just about to put the car into drive, I got a call from an ex-teammate that I hadn't heard from in 10 years. And he simply said to me was, Hey mate, just checking in to see how you're doing. I'm not sure exactly why I'm calling. I just felt the need that I had to call you to see if you were all right. Now, if I hadn't talked to that guy, there's no way that I'd be here today. If I hadn't picked up the phone to see, but I was intrigued to see a teammate's number flash up on my screen that I hadn't talked to in 10 plus years. And so the reality is, because someone thought about me in that instant and reached out to me in that instant, is the whole reason that I'm still here now.
Think about what the odds are on that happening.
It's pretty astronomical. I probably should have bought a lottery ticket, if I'm totally honest with myself, straight afterwards. But I think in the last couple of
winning
years,
Powerbill 3 times in the next 2 weeks than that happening. That is just chilling and unbelievable. The odds are they're not in your favour, and I'm so glad that your mate rang, and that's the importance of guys having. Your mate had a gut feeling and he reacted on it, and that's the reason you're still here.
Yeah, and he had no reason to expect that or suspect that something was wrong with me either. And I think that's the power of knowing that mental illness is invisible. Like the external shell doesn't tell the true story of an individual. And for me, if you looked at me, you wouldn't have assumed anything was wrong with me. It was my own battles that I was having with myself at that stage, and only I knew about them. But as I was saying to you the other day, like, mental illness doesn't judge you for your skin color, for your economic wealth, for your social status. It can affect anyone. And just because you think a mate is fine because his life seems fine, like everyone's life seems fine on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Like that's all we really see our mates these days is through social media, especially if you're in Victoria. That's all you get now is social media feed for the next 6 weeks of how your mates are doing. And reality is, the first wave of COVID and people having to stay inside affected a lot of people. The fact that you have to go back in after tasting freedom, there's going to be a lot more people affected by it. I expect the suicide rate to go up exponentially again after this. And so it's important that if there is someone that you care about and you do have these 6 weeks to sit around and think about it, that we are getting on the phone and talking to our mates. We are checking in with people. I take the opportunity with my trip from Perth to Bunbury that I do 2 or 3 times a week, just to call people, because that's what I need to do, just to stay connected with people to make sure that they're all right. And I see at the end of the day, there is no harm in checking in on someone, even if you're assuming that they're wrong. If nothing, at the worst, at the best, they are fine, and you've been able to catch up with a mate. At worst, you might be able to save someone's life, like my mate saved my life one day.
That's the power of the story, mate. It's simple. So what, your mate saved your life by making a call that cost him nothing. We talked about this the other day. The feeling that he's had just to ring you out of the blue after not speaking to you for 10 years is really, really powerful. And it cost him nothing. And he must be, when you told him what was going to happen, he must have just been, he obviously just listened to you. Didn't try anything else but just listen. Is that right?
He did. I mean, I think, and I don't know where everyone sits on this, and I think this is where you're getting at with your rating out of 10 of how was your day out of 10. But just to ask someone, are you okay, is a little bit condescending now.
Yeah, I agree.
And are you okay day has become a little bit condescending, like there is something wrong with you. Actually, having a gut feeling of just checking in on someone. If people are willing to say something, they'll say it to you. They will come out and say it to you. And probably in those moments of where I was, it was probably that moment that I needed to tell someone what was happening in my life. I needed to say it. And so not that he was probing to check if I was like everything was rosy in my world, but it was, divine intervention, call it what you may, that he called me when he did, because I definitely needed that phone call at that time.
From that point on, have you ever had those thoughts again, or has that just changed everything for you?
It changed everything to me, and it got me into the line of work that I'm doing now. And, I'm now a recovery worker for Chorus Mental Health Services with recovering drug addicts and alcoholics, and getting them out of the house and being active in their day-to-day life. I speak to high school students about depression, anxiety, and when I first got asked to do that, I had no idea that mental illness would start that early in so many kids that are now in school, because school is so different from when you and I both went to school, and the pressures that are put on kids these days are astronomical. Talking to companies and listening to people's that tell their stories in front of their peers that had absolutely no idea what they'd been through themselves, or a family member that close to them had been through. I remember doing a talk for the city of Bunbury, and a lady had told me that she had wanted to commit suicide, and the lady that sits next to her at work every single day just started bawling her eyes out because she didn't know and considered herself one of her best mates. Now,
Wow.
why she would tell me that in front of 150 colleagues, I'll never know. But it opened up a whole world of conversation within the city of Bunbury workers now, that they get more help than they've ever had before. So the work that I do now, I just find so much more rewarding than anything that I did in the basketball world. And when you talk to a person that's been to 2 Olympics and 2 World Championships and represented his country over 100 games, to say that you found something more rewarding, I truly find myself one of the lucky ones to go through my experience that I did, to be able to relay my message now and help others that need it more.
That's such a powerful message, because it is having the courage to talk about it openly and honestly in the way you do, and to encourage others and get that information out of that woman who you spoke about. She's only done that, mate, because you're so open and honest. And then in turn, what we have found, we've done some similar things to that, and then she will be open and honest to someone else, and they will open up, and on it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's similar to what you just said at the start. Like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just going through lived experience.
Yeah.
And I think what makes me relate better to a lot of people is because I've been through that experience, and I can tell you what it feels like. I can tell the people that have never experienced it but know a mate's going through it, and detail how that feels for that person and why they feel that way. And so I think being able to share my story, being open and honest with it, and letting people into my world, it is powerful in a lot of ways. But in the same token, like, I came into this thing saying if I could help one person, then, I've done my job. I've repaid what was done for me.
Yeah.
But the work that I do now, even though there's a fair bit of, it takes a piece of you as well. Well, it feels like it takes a piece of you, and you've got to be able to compartmentalize a lot of this sort of stuff. I feel like the work that I'm doing is just so powerful and can help so many more than just the one person that I aimed for at the start.
Absolutely. We talked about the other day the importance of the ability to be able to tell almost a stranger or a mate versus a family member. Do you find that in the line of work that you're doing now, do you find that people open up to you more, A, because you've had the experiences, and B, they can relate to you and you're not a family member? Do you find that?
Absolutely. I mean, the hardest person to tell when I was going through it was my mum, because I didn't want to put my mum, my dad, my brother and my sister through that sort of stuff. And so I found refuge in a mate that not many of my mates actually know this mate of mine. And that was the key for me, that he was a friend of mine, but not many of my other mates actually knew who he was. And for some reason, that became so much easier for me to talk to him about stuff, because I didn't feel like I was putting a burden that he had to hold a secret around my other friends or my family or whatever. It just became easier for me to tell him stuff. So I'm very grateful that I had someone like that. And for some people, it is easier to tell their mates, but we know that a lot of people hate telling their family and hate telling their mates, their very, very close mates, because they don't want them to be exposed to that side of them, I guess.
The key is, though, that your mate, all he did was he rang you, but he just listened. And I think that's a really powerful message, because a lot of guys don't ring because they're shit scared about what the answer is going to be.
Yeah.
And scared of, if I ring my mate and he says he's a 2 out of 10, what am I going to do then? Just listen. Because the fact that you've given him the opportunity to rank his day and tell you it's a 2, you're in a really important position that you just need to listen. And that's powerful. Mate, I'd imagine when you walk in a room, you're 6'8", you're 115 kilos, built like a brick shit house. I can imagine you walk in a room and people go, what's this guy got to be worried about?
Yeah.
Big, strong basketballer, what's he got to be worried about? Was there ever that sort of feeling?
Well, I felt like I sort of commanded respect when I walked into a room regardless. And so I think people knew when I walked into a room on presence alone. But I think it goes back to that it doesn't discriminate at the end of the day. Anthony Bourdain had the best job in the world. He got to travel around the world. He got to stay in the best hotels. He got to eat the best food. He got to drink the best alcohol to pair with the food, and he got paid for it, and he got paid millions of dollars for it. But his depression got the best of him, and he ended up hanging himself in a hotel in France. And so you can just assume all you want that people are going to be okay, but I guess it really highlights the importance of actually connecting with your mates. And sometimes it is having the tough conversations with them and asking the tough questions. Maybe you've noticed something. I mean, the best thing about what I was doing when I was talking was I could see everyone's face. They couldn't hide from me. I could tell someone was going through some shit straight away, or they knew someone that was going through some shit straight away. And then you get the people that have no idea what you're talking about because it doesn't affect them. I was one of those guys that actually thought that mental health was a weakness in people for a long period of time, because I never went through it and I didn't understand it. I grew up in that era of you got to toughen up. If there was something mentally weak with you, then there was something wrong with you. We always used to say if someone had a mental case, that they should be chucked in the loony bin away from society. Well, it is what it is now. There's so many people that go through what I went through and what I still fight on a day-to-day basis. I know it's not going to go away anytime soon. I know that I have to do what I have to do to stay on top of things, which brings me to a really important topic of putting mental deposits for yourself every day. And I always equate it to a bank. You keep on depositing stuff for yourself mentally in the positive. So when that one day comes, and I'm sure a lot of us have been through it, we wake up in the morning and we're like, fuck, it's on my doorstep today. It's here. And how do we handle it? Well, I know that I've done a series of things for the last 3 weeks to a month, 2 days, whatever it may be, to prepare myself for this moment so I can limit myself to one bad day. That's the goal, is to limit myself to one bad day and not let it run on for a week or a month or a year, because I went through the year of feeling shitty, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I was sick for 3 to 4 months where I was lying in bed and I couldn't get up. And I think it was just compounded by how I was doing mentally. And then I learned to look after myself and do stuff daily as a regime to look after myself going forward. And that's what I had to do. And what I still have to do today. I know there's 4 things that I need to do. I need to make my bed in the morning. I need to work out. I need to talk to someone just to check in, or for myself personally, if I'm feeling a little bit down, to have a conversation. And then at the end of the day, I need to think of at least 2 or 3 positive things that I got out of the day. So I start the day on a high, I end the day on the high, and I do maintenance with my physical and my mental in between.
And you know what happens if you don't do that.
Yeah, well, I run the risk of it.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee that it won't happen if I skip something, but I run the risk of knowing that there was something there that I missed, and I could have put a deposit into my mental health bank that I didn't. And so when the day comes, and luckily it's been a while since I've had a really, really bad day, but when the day comes, I know that I'm equipped now to take that hit, move forward, and limit it to just that one day. And hopefully, the way things have been going, that I can limit it to an afternoon. And it's okay to feel shitty for that afternoon or that day, but then I move on with my life and keep living a happy and healthy lifestyle.
So there's some real positives there. It's all about mindfulness and gratitude, and more importantly, some really, really good tips there. Like, don't let a shitty day turn into a shitty week, turn into a shitty month. And the other one is, which I love, we talked about this the other night, was when you get up and make your bed. That's such a simple thing, and then you're off. Then you're up and going. That's such a simple thing for blokes to do as soon as tomorrow morning.
It's a twofold attack, making your bed. A, once you made your bed, you don't want to jump back into bed.
Correct.
And B, it's a task and an accomplishment to start off your day. And we all know when we're having those shitty days, it's so difficult to get a task done and to feel like you've accomplished something. But that's a great way to start your day. And I know it's the military approach of, getting out of bed and making your bed and all that. But I find that routine is just as important during all this, and having the stuff. Now, that works for me. I'll say that. And it took a while to find what worked for me. But everyone needs to find what works for them. And it might take a time. It's like a what is it? A palm olive shampoo commercial. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Yeah, Pantene, sorry.
You're showing your age there, my friend.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. But at the end of the day, everyone's got to find what works for them and what is unique for them. And I just find that starting my day and ending my day with a positive, while filling in between with a physical and a mental aspect, really helps myself out.
Yeah, mate. One of the other things we talked about is, and one of your other, great achievements that you've undertaken is getting the mental health into the NBL and making that a permanent fixture for all the clubs. That's a real legacy, mate. A real legacy.
Yeah. I was the president of the Players Association. I think the last 4 years I was playing. And I'd moved from vice president to president. So I think the last 6 years, and the NBL was really in a shit-house position at that point. And one of the last things that I was really huge on was getting a mental health officer to be able to go to every club and to communicate. And so this was back in 2016, 2017, whenever I finished playing, that I'd bought that in. I made sure it was a priority. That was probably the last thing I did before stepping down after I retired. And I was really happy that happened, even though there was no known cases of mental health at that time, even though I didn't identify as going through some mental health issues. You could see the writing on the wall that could have been an issue going forward. And I wanted to make sure that the players were protected going forward.
You must be so proud of that legacy that you've left, mate. That's amazing. And then to know that that's one of your crowning achievements through your career is great, and that will live on forever. And I'd imagine, I think I'm right in saying that you've implemented that prior to a lot of other sports in this country.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it ranks as priority of who got in where first and all that, but it just seemed relevant at the time that we needed to make a step in that direction. And I'll probably understand later on in life maybe the effects that this is going to have on the NBL, but I'm grateful that it's there now for the current players. I'm grateful that they get to be able to speak to someone, and someone's there to listen to them going forward.
Yeah, mate. With a couple of questions here, what's the difference between coaching and the focus on mental health now compared to when your career started, or even towards the end of your career? Like, you must now, as a coach, it must be one of the main points that you push.
Yeah, I have a very, very young group that I coach now, and for me, I'm finding that the mental is probably more important than the physical aspect, and having that relationship with my kids and understanding what's going on in their life. And it's a really tricky time. You got high school students in my team. We've had the coronavirus and people being in lockdown. I had one guy in particular whose girlfriend broke up with him for 5 years. They've been together for 5 years, broke up with him 3 days before lockdown got implemented. And he had to be in a house by himself during that time, and the effect that had on him. And so as much as I'm there as their coach, I'm probably more there as their sounding board. And that's why I've got great assistants that I surround myself with that take probably a lot of the actual training stuff that allows me to build the relationships that I do with the kids now.
That seems to be a pretty common thread with coaches now. It's a totally different ball game when you were being coached yourself. You imagine how much more, do you think you get a lot more out of players now than what it would have back then?
Oh, a lot more. No, I mean, people just wouldn't speak about it back when I was playing, of fear that they would be judged, I think. But we have moved a long way, to Australia's credit, and we've come a long way. But for people that are in this sort of world of work, and we have so much more to go, and we don't understand what technology has done to kids and social media and expectations. School is different. Like, the world is totally different from what we grew up in. I think as adults, as dads, as mums, as teachers, as coaches, we have to have a much greater tolerance level and understanding than we've ever had to have before, because what we assume is we had no issues when we were going through as a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. We knew that we just had to play sport, have fun with our mates outside, go to school, whatever that may be. Life was great, and then it became hard as an adult. Well, for kids,
it was a lot simpler, wasn't it?
Life is pretty complicated now for kids, and we'll never understand. We never had to go through cyberbullying. We never had to go through social media. All that sort of stuff, we sort of bypassed, and we were outside smelling the roses, which might tell us why we were probably had less numbers, because we were enjoying life instead of looking at fake and, made up lives that people post on their Instagram stories these days. And then trying to compare our lifestyle to other people's lifestyles that are mates of ours. Like, no one ever posts an argument that they have with their partner on Instagram. It just doesn't happen because no one wants to see that sort of stuff. But we all know behind closed doors, there's multiple people going through multiple issues. There's kids that are going through physical abuse. mental abuse, seeing parents separate and be in abusive relationships, all that sort of shit that we've never had to sort of deal with. That's why our level of understanding has to be so much greater now.
That's so true. Mate, one of the guys who regularly watches the show, Adam Douglas, said, "Great job, Wortho. Thanks for such an honest chat," from Adam Douglas, mate. There's heaps of people here, mate, that are just saying, "Thank you so much for sharing. You're so open and honest. Thanks for helping others." The real message here, mate, is just ring a mate. It's as simple as that. Cost you nothing. And the effects of ringing a mate are huge.
Most of the things that I implemented into my daily routine cost nothing. Making your bed costs nothing. Working out yourself costs nothing. Like I said, I went for a run today. Calling up a mate costs nothing. Telstra might try and charge you a little bit extra, but don't worry about them. And then thinking about the positives of your day at the end of the night, that costs you nothing. These are all things that you can do for free. And,
they're a choice, aren't they? They're a choice.
It is a choice, and it becomes a ritual and a habit. And once you get those ritual and habits down, then you can see for yourself that you can build up your own sort of resilience through what you're doing by routine and keeping that regular routine.
Mate, I know you've got to get off the training. Thank you so much on behalf of myself, Waltz, and all the boys at 100 Words and everyone who's watched. Thank you for your openness and honesty. Mate, I couldn't be happier. I'm so glad that you've pulled through and you're doing such amazing things in the community in WA, and the more people that listen to you, the better. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Wortho. I really appreciate it.
And I'd say the last thing is it's not hard to find me on LinkedIn. It's not hard to find me on Instagram at Wortho33. If you do want to chat and you do want to get something off your chest, feel free to message me. I'm happy to talk. I talk to quite a few people every day now, and look, I'm not looking for anything, but I just want people to feel better about themselves. So feel free to message me, and if you've got something you want to get off your chest, or you want, just feel free to write to myself. Mate,
the willingness to give back after what you've been through is it's overwhelming, and thank you so much for your time tonight, mate. It's been great having you. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Bye.
No worries. Take care, Willow.
Bye.
See you, mate. If that doesn't make you think about your mates and call them, nothing will. That's an extraordinary story. That's got to have an effect on you. Just ring your mate. Doesn't matter what time it is. Just do it. It won't cost you a thing. If Mark's mate has never rung him, after not speaking to him for 10 years, and he rang him on a gut feel, we wouldn't have done that interview. Mark wouldn't be here. Thank you so much to him. Thank you so much for everyone that watched tonight. I just want to do a quick promo to Lawrence Hayden, who is a psychologist that is on board here at 100 Words. I know he's seeing some of our members. I'm actually started seeing him myself, and he's doing an amazing job. And I personally thank him so much for helping me, and I know he's helping a lot of others. We've got a great setup with him. If you're a 100 Words member, you get to see him for nothing, 10 sessions over the year, and you should be able to get another 5 with a mental health first aid check. It's simple. Mental health first aid check took me 6 minutes. It's so uninvasive. Look, as we do every week, we thank those who do so much for us. A huge thanks to Waltz, one of the board members who puts tonight on. He's done an amazing job and does do every week. To Shelley Wood from Splice Communications. Shelley's one of the biggest backbone behind 100. What she does for us each and every week is remarkable. We love you, Shelley. To Matt Atkin and 61 Finance and Atlas Equipment Finance for their constant support, and the team there do a hell of a lot for 100 Words. And my mate Brett Phillips, who He's a huge member of the community, does a lot for the tennis community, runs the only tennis program nationwide on SEN called The First Serve. He does a great job. Now, one of his mates and one of my mates, Sam Groth, tennis superstar in this country, Newcombe medalist in 2015, is going to join me next week. Spoke to Sammy today after he jumped off the golf course and knocked him for 6, just hit him out of the ballpark. He's agreed to come on next week. Cannot wait to have a great chat with Sam next week and talk about his life on the tennis circuit and what he's doing now. Guys, if that doesn't hit home, what you saw tonight and what you listened to, nothing will. Do me a favour and do yourself a favour and just ring a mate tomorrow, please. Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.